Today on Accidental Experts with Bryce Hamilton.
Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. So we are going to be talking about executive functioning. We're going to break it down with a special guest, Seth Perler, and he's going to be talking to us about how to help both our neurodiverse kids, so ADHD, learning disability, autism, and there's more under that title, but with those diagnoses, and then also our neurotypical kids. And he's going to teach us what it is, how to use it, and why it is so important. With that, let's get to Seth.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here, Bryce. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to be talking about executive functioning. Can you tell us about what makes you kind of an expert in executive functioning and like what information you have to share with us?
Yeah, so we were talking a moment ago, but as far as the term expert, I'm not a fan of it for myself because I'm not special, and you're not special, Bryce, in terms of that we just are people who you've obsessed about therapy and counseling for many years. I've obsessed about executive function. It's I'm passionate about it, but the reason I don't like the term expert is because anybody can learn these skills or learn about this thing. It's not something that you need to go to a special person like me for. Now, I have obsessed about this for years and have very specific ways that I've seen that actually create help for kids that I believe in that work for the way that I approach it. But there are so many people doing so much good work. But my name is Seth Perler. I have a site called SethPerler.com and a summit called ExecutiveFunctionSummit.com. And what my focus is serving kids to the best of my capacity before the day I die as much as I can who have executive function challenges. These are kids with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, kids with no diagnosis whatsoever, kids with trauma. These are kids who struggle to execute tasks, to get important things done. So they might struggle with any aspect of execution, which might be organization, planning, time management, prioritizing the important thing over the fun thing when it matters. So it's, and usually the way that it manifests, what we see is the tip of the iceberg where our kids' grades are falling apart. There's a lot of zeros, missings, incompletes, late work, test corrections, and they're resistant. Most of the kids I work with are resistant, especially to their parents helping them. Why do I have to do this? This is stupid. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it later. I've got this. Why can't you just trust me? Everything's fine. I can handle it, despite the fact that they continually can't. That there's this really strong and very important desire to be independent and to be able to navigate these things. But what they don't realize, and what the parents often don't realize, or the teachers even, is that it's not a matter of just like trying harder and working harder and caring more and things like this, which tend to be very common misunderstandings. But it's a function of that the skills that are necessary to do the things at the level they're being asked to do, they do not have those skills developed enough yet to be able to manage all of those things.
Yeah, which would be so frustrating for both them and the parents and the teachers, especially if they don't know why. I mean, like the zeros, and my audience knows, but like I have ADHD, and I remember like I was the kid with the papers crumpled at the bottom of my backpack, or I'd be like, I swear I turned that in. Right?
That is exactly my students. I swear I turned it in. I know I turned it in. I remember turning it in, and they mean it. They often are visualizing, they've seen themselves do it. And the backpack, things are just crumbled, and the locker is packed. And yes, that is, you are my people.
Yes. Yeah. So how can parents recognize or teachers recognize this early? You gave us some idea of what this challenge might look like, but like, what might they be looking for to say like, hey, my kid does have a challenge with executive functioning?
Did you say early, meaning like earlier grades?
Yeah, like when they're younger. Like, is there a way, things that we can pick up on? Because I know that like if we were waiting till high school to notice this, and sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Like that's when it is, right? Like, and you might be listening to this now and you're like, okay, I have a 10th grader and that's just what it is. But like, if we can see it sooner in life, then maybe we can do something to build those skills faster or sooner so that they're using them.
That's a great question, because I get parents a lot of times who say, when should I start? And my response is, and probably all the different experts that I interview on my summit and stuff, probably people that you know as well, the answer is as soon as possible. The sooner the better. There's no reason to wait.
Yes.
These are skill sets, and the sooner we start building the skill sets, the better.
Yes.
So, but what often happens is that what I see in my work is that people often don't know that there are problems until usually around 5th grade, and that's when things start falling apart. Now it can be later, but it's very common around 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, middle school, things start falling apart. In certain states in the United States, and you probably have an audience all over the world, but for people in the US, a lot of times what we call middle school is grades 6, 7, and 8. And the way that I phrase it is that the hand-holding stops oftentimes at that point. And when the hand-holding stops, then you really see what skills the child has or doesn't have. So why this is such a great question is because, are there red flags that we can see earlier? And how do we see those? And yes, there are. And if you do, then you want to make whatever interventions you can as early as possible. So the things that you're going to look for is relative to their peers, to kids that are around the same age as them. Are they able to, quote, execute? You can keep it that simple. Execute on important tasks when it's important, when it needs to happen. Are they able to prioritize, as I said earlier, the important thing over the fun thing when it matters? And do the thing that needs to be done. So if your child is in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten, whatever, and they're struggling with organization relative to their peers, they're struggling with time management and planning and thinking things through and future thinking, all relative to their peers, whatever age they are, just in that general age group, does there seem to be a delay in these things relative? And if you're really not making excuses for your kiddo and you're getting very honest with yourself and you're saying, you know, that I think one of the problems in the States is that we culturally have, there's a lot of shame around asking for help. Or if we notice that our child is struggling with something, then there's something's wrong with us as the parents, or something's wrong with our kid, or somebody's broken it. And this whole frame is such BS. That is not reality. Asking for help is the most important thing that any successful person in any domain ever does. Nobody does it alone. Nobody. So, but we really want to get real honest with ourselves and say, you know, are they struggling with these sorts of things that I've outlined? That I talk about 13 or 14 different executive functions depending on the day, but those are the general things, like being able to manage anything and everything that has to do with getting an important task done. Maybe they start their homework, but they don't finish it. Maybe they finish it, but they don't put their name on it and turn it in, or they shove it in the bottom of the backpack. It doesn't get turned in, like you were talking about. Maybe they can never find anything. It takes them forever to get out the door in the morning. They're just completely don't follow routines well. When there are really great firm routines, they respond really well to them. But when there's any type of flexibility in it, that it's really difficult for them to create their own routines around things and habits around things. So there's all sorts of ways you can look at this. So having said all those things, and that wasn't like a comprehensive checklist by any means, this is just what I'm giving you as a vibe of what you're looking for. Then there's the gut check test. And that is, does your gut tell you that your kid is struggling with these things? And if you're not sure if your gut tells you that, then think about this. Are you worried about your kid being independent when they're older? And if that scares you and you're like, how's my kid going to be able to do this? I see other kids being able to handle X, Y, and Z. How's my kid going to be able to have their own apartment, pay their own bills, have a great relationship, you know, show up for work, things like this? If you're having those sorts of fears and your kid's in 2nd grade, then it might be wise to look into executive function.
Yeah. I love that gut check because I tell parents often in my practice, I'm like, I trust you. Like if your gut is saying something's wrong or you don't feel good about this, like I believe that more than anything else that I can see on paper, because as parents, we know our kids and sometimes we want to protect them and be like, oh, they'll grow out of this or it will be fine. Or, like I struggled with this too, but I figured it out. And I appreciate that, yes, we are resilient or we can be resilient as human beings, but also getting support and help is amazing because the sooner you have skills, the less you have to struggle with that thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also when we're questioning ourselves like this too, they're also, and tell me if you see this, Bryce, as well, or hear something like this from the parents, but there can be from, we want to assume positive intent. We want to assume that the teachers in the school has their stuff together and all that, but there is plenty of gaslighting that goes on with teachers in schools who are misinformed about this stuff and who think the same sort of thing. The kid's going to grow out of it. They need to try harder. They need to work, or whatever the narrative is. If it's a narrative that doesn't take into account what's going on with this kid developmentally as far as executive function is concerned, and anything related to that, again, trauma or ADHD, undiagnosed, and things like this, like other sorts of things that might influence this, then we're missing the mark. So if you're a parent and you feel like that gaslighting is taking place, trust your gut. It may have not, but it may have. Have you heard a bunch of stories that?
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. Well, and I think what's hard is, when we don't know about these things, I think teachers, sometimes we consider them like the expert. Like you said, our podcast is Accidental Experts, but really just that, like, we're all learning what is important to us. And sometimes I intentionally became a therapist, but I have accidentally become an expert on a lot of things. And maybe not expert is the best word, but just like I am very knowledgeable because I'm so curious, right? Like I just want to know more because it helps me serve my own family, but also the community. But I think, we see teachers and think that they know all the things, and teachers are really smart and do know a lot of things, but they don't know everything. Right. And so sometimes I think it's also about how the ship is being led in terms of like the principal or the direction of the school district. And so
in their training they were,
I was just going to say, yes. And how much training they get on these things, right? For their like continuing education kind of stuff. And so there's so many expectations. And so sometimes I think, some of the simplest things would be the most helpful. And yet the schools have them focusing on other things that might not have as great of an impact, but are still important. And so I get that there's only so much time. And so, yes. And I, even as a parent, was gaslighted by my kids' school district about like, we've got this, like, it's not a big deal. We can handle this. And then I was like, yeah, we don't have this. We do not have this. Like, we have to go out and get some other resources to help our children and figure this out for our family. And so, yes, I definitely think that if you feel like nothing's moving, if the pendulum is not swinging the other way, if the skills don't seem to be getting in place, right, then so wise to seek outside counsel, because chances are waiting is not going to be to your best interest.
Yep.
Yeah, which is hard because sometimes, like, as parents, we're also exhausted and have so many things on our plate, and we're just like, okay, yeah, I want to believe that the school has this, or, somebody else is going to help take care of this. But oftentimes, like, we've got to be an active participant in that part. Nobody told you how hard parenting or raising children was going to be before you did it. I'm like, yes, this is hard. This is so hard. Yeah,
we were having that talk in my community yesterday. Somebody asked a question, and I was like, it's just hard. They're like, is it always going to be that? I forget how they worded it, but I was like, it just is. We were talking about planning in particular, family planning, like doing family calendars and building this up, and trying to manage everybody being where they need to be and all this stuff. And that's a lot of executive function for the parents. And it just is hard. We live in a more complex world than ever before. When I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, it was like, come home, do some homework, go out and cause trouble in the neighborhood for a few hours, come back for dinner, and go to bed. Like it's just like there wasn't all these things vying for my attention. It was like hanging out outdoors, being in the woods, hanging out with friends, and the most fun video games was like Atari. It's like
yes, they didn't have our attention as much, for sure. And maybe that was the better way of being in nature. I think there's so much. I don't know what better really is, but it's like I do think kids are very programmed. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So you've worked with tons of students, tons of families on these things. Can you tell us about what the executive functioning skills are? I want to say like the best, but like what do you find is really successful with kids that are struggling with executive functioning in terms of tools?
Well, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody where like for me, as somebody with ADHD and executive function challenges my whole life, now I have tools to work with it. But one of the hardest ones for me of all is prioritization. My brain is horrible at prioritizing. And for years, when I didn't know as an adult that I had ADHD, my strategy was to just like throw spaghetti at a wall, do so many things that I knew I would get the important things done eventually. But I was getting into burnout a lot, because I was just exhausting myself because I didn't know how to systematize well enough to really manage stuff. So for me, prioritization is an executive function skill set that is just horrible. So now I have much better workarounds and systems around that thing. But when I say I talk about 13 or 14 different executive functions, when we're looking at our kids, and we really are going to hear parents that, and there's a question that parents often have, which is, where do we even start? They start going down the rabbit hole and they're like, okay, my kiddo struggles with this and this and this. Where do we start? And the good news is, and the interesting news is that I talk about spoke theory. I wish I had my whiteboard here. It's over there. But if you imagine a wheel with the spokes of a wheel and all these different spokes, well, that's how I think about these 13 or 14 skill sets. They all work together. Like the wheel is rolling with all the spokes working together. So anything that your kid has to do, whether it's reorganizing their backpack, getting out of the door in the morning, and all the activities that need to happen just to get out the door in the morning, finishing an assignment, doing their chores, playing video games, all of these things require executive functions, the 13 or 14 different executive functions. So, and some experts will say there are 3 or 5 or 8, doesn't really matter. I talk about these, like I call advocacy an executive function, even though it's not technically, but I lump it in there because it's an important topic when I'm working with families on those spokes. The executive functions would be things like planning, organization, time management. But you also have things like hyperactivity and impulsivity, but you also have inhibition. So the executive functions sort of have 2 sides of the same coin. Inhibition is holding back, not being impulsive, not being, quote, hyperactive, like resisting an impulse to do something. So that our executive functions help us to resist the impulse to do things that are, quote, inappropriate, or not resist the impulse to do those things. But as we get better executive function, we get better at that. But those are 2 sides of the same coin on a spoke. So I'm not going to go super into this, Bryce, but I just want to, again, give people a vibe that there's anything that the brain has to do to execute tasks. We do have to resist being impulsive, and we do have to have inhibition in order to execute whatever the important task is at the time. We do have to prioritize. We do have to regulate emotion. That's part of executive function as well. And regulating emotion is another big, huge, I don't want to, executive function, the term sounds scary. It's not as scary as it sounds because it sounds so clinical. But it's also not just simple, like emotional regulation. And are you a fan of Stephen Porges and Deb Dana? And
yes.
Do you know Julia Caldwell?
I don't.
Oh, she's one of my favorites in the polyvagal world. She's out of Boulder, Colorado. She's really neat. But I love polyvagal theory. So, but like when we're looking at emotional regulation, I talk about 2 things. I talk about the body and the story. And I'm guessing, Bryce, you've gravitated towards models you really like. But the body and the story is the narrative. So whether we're talking about somatic approaches or different types of therapies, don't worry, parents, I'm not going to lose you here in this interview. Just stick with me. But we have a narrative or a story in our mind about the thing. So somebody cuts us off. Oh, that person's such a jerk, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that they're a jerk. I don't know that. I don't know what's happening in their personal life. I've cut people off completely oblivious, and something's been going on in my life. I was stressed out and I wasn't paying as much, So we have a narrative about a thing. Oh, I have a test. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. I have a test. I forgot I have a test. Oh my God, I have a test. Who cares? Tests are stupid. I don't care. I hate this class. We have a narrative or a story about a thing. And then we have the body. That is the nervous system's, the bodily sensations that we are feeling around our story about the thing. If we see a rattlesnake walking in the road right where we're about to step, we should have a story that says, oh my gosh, that looks really dangerous. I'm going to back up and evaluate this situation. And then we can walk away. Our nervous system can re-regulate, but we get stuck into these loops. Anyhow, I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but the point is that there are these different things that happen with executive function. Now, another part of executive function is task initiation. What a not fun word. It just means self-starting, right? But the clinical term is task initiation. And then we have task completion. We have to be able to start, follow through, and finish through to completion. That's part of executive function. How do we, quote, motivate ourselves? You could use that word if you like. How do we not procrastinate? You could use that term if you like. So I don't like when experts are like, these are the exact words. I like the flexibility to be like, hey, these are the types of things that the brain is trying to do to execute tasks. So you as the parent now, you can look at these executive functions in terms of, like when you said what was the most important one or the most important ones. It's really hard to say because they all work together, but I can answer you in a more concrete way in terms of what are the most important concrete actual things the kid has to do to build executive functions. And what I would say about that is learning systems for planning. And we can go totally down the rabbit hole. There's essentially visual planning, auditory planning. Like we're using executive function to plan all the time. When your kid is playing video games, they're using their planning skills in their mind and the auditory skills, visual skills in their mind when they're playing a video game. So we're using these all the time. But to be concrete about it, to give people an answer that they can run with, that is that I teach 3 main types of planning. A daily plan. In other words, generally I'm working, with middle, high school, college. So kid gets home from school and they need to plan that evening. So rather than it being random, like you and I probably did when we were kids, and we may or may not get done what we need, and it's chaotic and random, and we're forgetful, that they learn the skill of saying, okay, what do I have to do tonight? Got some math, got some science, got some social studies, learn. And I teach a way that I teach daily planning where they're prioritizing and thinking through how long it'll take because there's time blindness. And so then I teach more of like planning with your calendar, your daily, whether they use a digital or a paper planner that they carry around with them. So there's planning on that as well, which is different from the daily plan. And then I teach kids to get a big giant wall calendar. Actually, I have one here. So if you're watching this on the video version, it's just a big $5 calendar, and I teach them how to really color code it and out of sight, out of mind. Just put the big things on it. So anyhow, I teach methods around this. But if you want to know what are the most important executive functions, I don't know. But this teaching planning is one of the most important ways. Now, one of the other most important ways to teach executive function, in my opinion, is organizing. AKA clean slating, AKA decluttering, AKA minimizing, because I'm a big fan of minimalism for kids with ADHD. Less is more is less. Make what's easy is hard, make what's hard easy. Like the more stuff we have, the more stuff we have to manage.
Yes.
So I want kids to really learn to manage a manageable amount of things, have homes for things, have things labeled, have a place for everything, have a home for everything. And learning the process of decluttering and reorganizing and organizing and stuff, and building the skill sets around that. So those are 2 of the most important skill sets, would be massive skills around planning and organization. Now, the third one one that I would say if I had to pick three would be the emotional regulation piece. Empowering a kid to have vocabulary and language around what's going on in their emotional world, what's going on somatically with them in their body, learning to identify those things in a more objective way using curiosity words. And I wonder why my body's doing that. I wonder why I'm so frustrated with this situation. And, rather than our inner critic shaming us like, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so mean when I think about that person, or I can't do anything right, or whatever the thing is. But having a relationship with our emotional world, with emotional regulation, having tools to notice what's going on in the body, to regulate the body, but also to work with the narrative and the story and know, when to question things, and know that our brain likes to default to negativity and turn mountains into molehills, and that's normal. And we don't have to just believe every thought we have and every feeling we have. Yeah. So those are the three areas: the planning, organization, and emotional regulation. That if a family is really focusing on those three things, you're going to hit everything else. But those would be massively amazing ways to be helpful to your child for the rest of their life, giving them skills in those three areas.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking before you said that part of like, these are great life skills, right? Like just thinking about like having, even if you're a neurotypical kid or adult, and somebody who can look at something and say, okay, this is the most important task, or here's the things I have to do. Like, where are we going to start? And being able to like time blindness, that is a real thing. And I think that that is such a helpful term for people that don't struggle with that, to help them to understand what it's like when it's either with ADHD brains. And I think this is with executive functioning challenges as well, is like, it's either now or later, right? Like it's either right now or like it's gone to the not now, which is like, could be any other time. It could be like in 5 minutes, but it's not right now. Excuse me. It could be in 5 hours. It could be in 2 weeks. Right. And so I think, we've, as somebody who has struggled with that of like, okay, I'll deal with that later. Right. It's like, okay, if I don't make a plan for that, if I'm not looking at the calendar to put that on there, then it's like, oh, shoot, that thing just crept up. And now we have the test tomorrow. Like, I cannot tell you, like, I'd have it in my mind and I'd be like, okay, I got to study. And then didn't. Or it's like, I'm staying up until, midnight to study and then not being able to do my best. And so I think the organization, like all of those things are so important, and just help our kids to have a good, like enjoyable life, right? Because like when you're always feeling like that shame part of not feeling like you manage something well. I mean, shame is, I don't love that emotion. I mean, I get that it's something that happens, but it's like, it becomes internal and then we feel like we're bad. And that is not the story. You are good, right? Like, it's just that, like, that part sucked. You didn't do so well, right? Like, okay, we can do it again. And I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready for this interview, I was like, I ate ice cream last night and I know I shouldn't eat ice cream because it just does not make me feel good. And I was like, you know what? But today is a new day. Like, I can make a better choice today. And so I think remembering that, like, yeah, we might have done something not great yesterday, or we didn't manage our time as well as we should have, but we can do better today, right? Every day is a new day and you can do better. And it's like, but it's also asking for help. And even adults need help with executive functioning. Just because you're an adult does not mean that you execute tasks well, or organized, or manage your things, and right, all of those.
And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The vast majority of the kids that I work with, their parents, if they don't already know they have executive function challenges, eventually they start saying, wow, I'm using these tools myself. I've been having these troubles my whole life. I didn't even know it.
Yes.
So the vast majority of families, one or both of the parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we're talking about,
I'm sorry. I have two questions for you.
Yes. Okay. I'm ready.
What kind of ice cream?
Well, last night it was a coffee ice cream. That was like a Colombian coffee ice cream. Oh,
yeah, that's so part of executive functions, decision making, and caffeine ice cream at night. Okay, Bryce.
It's crazy because coffee does not impact me that. I mean, it does, but like it doesn't wire me as much as maybe it should, but I don't even drink that much. I don't know. Yeah, but I love coffee ice cream. I'm also a mint chocolate chip girl, but I'm like, yeah. What's your other question?
Cookie dough from
yes.
That's my go-to, but they don't have any where I live now, so that's good. So my other question is this. My other question is, I have heard this question more times than I can count, but I wonder how you would and how you respond to it, because I'm sure you have your go-to for how you respond to it. When the parent says, "How do I know when I'm doing too much or not doing enough for my kid?"
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think
I'm sure you get that a lot.
Yes, yes. And I think there's a couple of ways that I might answer that, right? But my go-to, like what I thought of immediately when you said that is, can they execute the things? Can they do what you're, like, if we're just talking like general tasks, like I'm helping them get out the door or whatever. If you didn't do that part, would they be able to do it independently? Do they know what comes next? Right. In terms of a task, like at my house, I'm basically raising 4 ADHD kids. So the little one is only 3. So he has not had his official diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure my 8-year-old is like, I think he has ADHD. I'm like, thank you. Anyways, but he's 3. So, we're jury's still out. But I think, like having lists, I think the goal I have as a parent is to kind of remove myself. Like I want to be involved, like I want to be supportive, but the goal is like, can I teach it in a way where they can be independent? Because I think that's the thing that kids really want most is the independence. Even my 3-year-old wants to be independent, right? And there are things that he can't be independent on. So I think if I'm doing too much, then my kids are going to get resistant, or they're going to get irritated or upset, or I'm going to feel upset if I'm doing too much. And then I think if I'm not doing enough, then we're not having success. Again, that frustration factor. I think when we are in the zone, both people are feeling like the skill sets that we have are there or are being supported, then we feel like we leave for school happy. We go to bed. I mean, happy is relative, right? Like we're not angry at each other. And so we may feel neutral, which is also fine, but regulated. Does that answer, right? Like, so we're regulated. Great word. Thank you. So we're feeling that regulation or balance. So that's what I would say is how we would know it. Are we doing too much or too little? What do you think? How do you answer that question?
No, and this isn't on directly related to our topic, but I'm sure everybody listening can relate to this, but, well, I like what you said, like that you have this filter that's sort of like, would they be able to do it independently? So I think that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, I approach it. I mean, I also depends on the parent that's asking and the context around it, but similar type of thing that one is the gut check that you often something in you knows. And it might be that you're in a hurry, so you're doing it for them, or it's just easier, or there's always chaos when you don't. But you've trained them that you will do it for them, But and then I talk about scaffolding quite a bit.
Yes,
which
is such an important executive functioning part that we play as a parent is to teach our kids how to be successful with the scaffolding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please explain what you do. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's just, I think that one of the challenges for parents and teachers a lot of times is there's the comment, I know you can do it. I've seen you do it before. Mm-hmm. Well, in the context of this moment right now, they cannot do it. Mm-hmm. If they could, they would. Yeah. So there's more going on that's not on this, that's beneath the surface. So my brain is so tired. Can you reel me back in real quick?
Yes. So like in terms of scaffolding, like how do you, can we talk to parents about what that is exactly and what
so we know that they can do a thing, or we think that they can, but they really can't. So the scaffolding is this really compassionate, gentle way of saying, okay, this is where you're at, and I'm going to move you to the next micro step and the next micro step and the next micro step. It's not, you need to get your homework done. It's, well, you need to even know what your homework is and be clear about that. You need to even conceptualize how long it's going to take you, and you need to get your study space ready. You need to get your stuff out, and you need to turn off distractions. There are other pieces. It's not just get your homework done. So the scaffolding is really breaking it down into these small pieces and really saying what's going to really serve my kid and compassionately and empathetically in the situation to get them just to the next micro level. And again, it can be very frustrating because your kid has 18 missing assignments and they just need to get caught up. Well, they don't just need to get caught up. They need to also build skills while they're doing it. I hate that we live in such a time when so much of what kids are asked to do is just like jumping through hoops. Like the idea is if you do these things for this class and these questions at the end of the chapter and the tests and blah, 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 and you get a D and you pass the class, that means you have mastery over the content and you're ready to go on to the next level, especially if it's a subject that builds on itself. Then you go to the next grade and you have not achieved mastery or enough mastery to really be grounded to be successful. And and then we just teach kids to exhaust themselves, like do more, check things off the list. That's what it's about. That's not what it's about. So when we're scaffolding, we're really saying, and you can't do everything, but to pick your battles and say, you know what? We're going to work on this little thing and we're going to really help you get to the next level. And the way that you can think about scaffolding for yourself is think about one of your hobbies. And for anybody watching, any of your hobbies. So mine is guitar. I've been playing guitar for 30 years. So I'm at a high level, but I still I do have a teacher, but I see him once or twice a month. Because it's like a half hour because it's tweaking little. But for me, that's where I'm at with scaffolding. But when I was first learning, the scaffolding may have really just been about hand position, how to hold your fingers on the strings themselves, how much pressure, like really. Like that was a lot then. So for anybody with any of your hobby areas, you've found teachers or YouTubers or books or things that have helped scaffold you. And when you didn't, you stopped paying for the class and took another one, or you didn't read the rest of the book, or you found another, Instagrammer that explained it better, or whatever or friend who did it. So, if it's a sport that you do, whatever, if you're learning a brand new sport, let's say you're learning racquetball and you're playing with a pro, and the pro is awesome at teaching, they're going to break it down so good for you. If they're assuming that you should be at some level that you're not because they're completely out of touch, which there are people that are like that, then you're not going to go back to that person as your coach. So that's what scaffolding is about. It's about putting yourself in your kid's shoes, imagining like you're trying to find the right coach for whatever you want to excel in next, and that they're going to feel like they can make a little progress. Now, I know that for parents listening, that a lot of you might be thinking, yeah, but they're going to resist. Yes. I'm definitely not saying that's not going to happen. That's a whole nother thing. Resistance is a part of this, but the point stands. How your kid is capable of a lot, probably a lot more than we often give them credit for. So it's really getting it dialed into what is the right next little step that they can be successful at, feel a sense of success. So often they feel a sense of not success. Oh, no matter how hard I try, nobody notices how hard I try. I always screw up. I can't do anything right. Why even try? And that's a valid feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so key is to have our kids feel successful, because we love them, right? Like we want them to feel successful. And so I think, back to your question about, excuse me, how do you know if you're doing too much or not enough? I think, when we're teaching something, the goal is that we are going to do more. Right? Like we are going to intervene more. We are going to be more participatory. But the goal is also that they're going to be able to eventually master that skill and be able to independently do that thing. So sitting down, like, and also this comparison of like, yesterday you did this thing, today you can't do that thing. Like, what the heck? Like, why aren't you doing this? And it's like, okay, well, what happened? Like, there's clearly something, excuse me, in the way, because kids want to be successful. Everybody wants to be successful. So if they're struggling, it's not a function of them being bad or them not being able to do it. It just may be in this moment, I need more support. And I think, again, back to that asking for help thing of like, I am a recovering perfectionist. And so like, I learned to do like everything by myself, not ask for help. And life has humbled me in a way where I needed to ask for help. And I'm so thankful for that, actually, because it has made life so much easier. So I think for our kids to be like, hey, I'm mom, dad, I need help with this. Like, I don't know. I have all this work. Don't know how to, like, I'm just overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start. Right. And so then it's like coming to that with like compassion, like, okay, we got this. Like, we can do this together. Like, this is a team effort, because something I say in my household a lot is like, we're all in the same team. Right? Like, when you succeed, I succeed. Like, when we all succeed together, right? This is a joint effort. And it's not that like I only succeed if my kids are succeeding, right? It's not that. It's just that like, I am invested in your success. Like, I want to provide you the support and resources that you need, and also teach you how to do those things independently. So I think remembering that like, our kids asking for help or feeling overwhelmed, or if you just see them like sitting there staring off into space, they need help. Help them, right? Like, but I think, I also know that like, especially teens, like if I'm a parent and I see my teen kind of like staring off into space, or I go into the room several times, they're supposed to be doing homework and they're on their phone, or they're doing something, cleaning their room, right? Which may also need to be done, but like they're avoiding the homework part. How do we address resistance? Because I do think that trying to support our kids sometimes is a challenging piece. Like, they might resist our support.
Mm-hmm. They will.
Yes.
Especially for parents. So, so one of the things that I talk about is play in the gray. So you have sort of like your black and your white and your gray, and we want to play in this gray area because that's where growth happens. And there's the one side where we're not doing enough to support, and we're just like, figure it out, work harder, try harder, stop being a baby, like, which is a horrible like thing to say, or things like that are like implying like some judgment. And then there's the doing too much, the enabling, the learned helplessness zone. Mm-hmm. But in the gray is where the growth happens. It's uncomfortable for the kid, but it's appropriately uncomfortable for anything we're growing in. We want to be appropriately uncomfortable, whether it's back to the racquetball or the guitar or whatever. It's that and that is a challenge. That's a good challenge, and people love to be challenged. That's. But for parents, that gray zone is like that. For you and I, if it's not our own kids, it's nice and wide. We can do a lot with it. Yeah. But for your own child, so there's going to be a lot more resistance from your kiddo if it's your kiddo with you. So how do we help them move through that resistance? And this is where we'll wrap up today. And I could go on for hours on this topic, but you were using one particular example when you started saying this. What was that about resistance? What were they?
Oh, like a teenager, like doing stuff in their room, like basically doing something else, right? Like maybe they're cleaning their room, or they're on their phone.
Let's talk about the cleaning the room one. That's a great one, because if that is something that you want to do, anyhow, one thing is as adults, we get so, again, culturally, we're so into checking things off the list, and it can be like, okay, what are you doing? You're cleaning your room. Great. But it can be all serious, like, lighten up. So number one is have levity, have fun, have playfulness. You can actually say the exact same words or things that you need to say to your kid with a smile on your face and joy, and with a hug and playfulness, and probably get a lot more traction. Yes. So that's number one. Like, remember, this is supposed to be fun. This is the only day you have guaranteed with your kiddo. This is the only, we could be hit by a black hole the size of a marble and vaporized tomorrow. Sorry to be dramatic.
Well, sometimes we need to realize that, like, we've got to live in this moment. Yeah.
This this is life is so precious. Every day is so precious. So like enjoy your kiddo, like enjoy these times with them, even these times. But I would be approaching that with like I often say this to kids. So for those of you taking notes, you can definitely take notes on this, but I often will say, that's awesome. Because they're not expecting that. And it is, and I find something awesome about it because they are using executive function. I often bring it back to that. I say what's going on in their brain. That's so awesome. You're cleaning your room. You're totally avoiding your homework. That is so normal. I so get that. Oh my gosh, I avoid so many things too. And I can share something I avoid and my solution to it. Here's how I work through that. How do you work through avoidance, or what advice you have for me? Now you might be thinking, but my kid needs to get their homework done right now. Well, sorry. This is not easy stuff. This takes time. It really does take time, but you're going to go way farther, way faster. What's the saying? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Relax. Okay, they're cleaning the room. What are the wins with that? And so I'll reflect that back to them. And then I want the ownership and the buy-in. And if they're resistant, and just in this particular example, then I'm really going to be looking at what's blocking you right now. Would you like to be done with your homework? How long do you want to spend on it? 5 minutes? Cool. What is blocking that? Why isn't that happening? And I probably know maybe that they don't know where to start, or that they lost their paper and don't want to email the teacher to ask for another copy, or whatever the thing is. But I want them to tell me. I want to be a really open, compassionate, empathetic, relaxed, fun person. Like, cool. Well, what are you going to do about that? So I love this question. How are you going to solve that problem? How can I help? So that is not rescuing. And then some kids, they won't say anything. Some kids, their first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't know. And some kids, the first thing out of their mouth is just something to get you to stop talking. And some kids will give you a really valid answer. So that was 4 things that I just said there. So whichever the option is, follow it up with whatever the next best, cool, compassionate, chill, relaxed, fun thing is. That's going to help get where you need to get going. So the resistance is, and I know we need to wrap up here, but the resistance that they feel, or that you feel, or that I feel to doing my taxes, or I have a lot of big projects in my life right now. So to getting started on certain of my big ones, I know that it needs to be done, but the overwhelm of it is something that affects me. So I have to work through the overwhelm just to get started on it. So the resistance, what's really important about it is that when I talked about the body and the story, the resistance is an emotional thing. It's not just somebody being defiant. It's not just somebody talking back or getting angry or being willful or whatever judgment words we use. It is a legitimate feeling or set of feelings or emotions that their nervous system is being impacted by, that they feel unsafe. Their nervous system is saying, this isn't safe. I feel threatened. And you may know logically that they're not being threatened, that they are completely safe. You may know not logically that you want to lecture them and explain to them and parent-splain them and make them see the light, or punish them or reward them, or whatever tools you have at your disposal to, quote, motivate them. But those are not addressing the root of the issue. Resistance is an emotional thing. And whether we are formally like working through it with them, with the story and the narrative, as I was mentioning before, which you do a lot, I know, in your work, or whether we're informally doing something just by co-regulating and being not crafty, what's the word, scrappy, and being let's so I'll do this with you, Bryce, right now. I know you're looking at me on the camera, so I didn't even say take a breath, and you just took a breath. I don't know what. Yeah. So that co-regulation, like we can show in our nervous system that we can regulate and slow down. And so when we're working with the resistance with our kiddo, we're working with those 2 things, the body and the story. It's not just get over it and get your butt going and get started. I don't know why you're making this so hard on yourself. And, that's not helping. And to really get to, wow, that, and I love this, I say this a lot. Wow, that sounds really tough. Wow, that sounds really frustrating. Wow, that sounds really hard. That sounds really difficult. What are you going to do to solve that problem? How can I help? Type thing. So that I'm noticing that the resistance is legitimate. They're having an actual felt experience, and when we don't acknowledge it, we're really missing the boat here. So to acknowledge that, you'll get better and better at it. It's a skill. So for you as the parent or the teacher, you'll get better and better and better at it. And for Bryce, I'm sure Bryce is way better at it in a lot of ways than I am, that you have your tools as a therapist. And when someone's in the office, you're noticing, I'm sure you're way more skilled at noticing their nervous system and than I am, but you're very aware of that because you've trained yourself to do that. And then you work within that context to help lead the person to their own solution. Am I speaking for you in that or what?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I am hearing you say this and I'm like, this, how you're addressing the resistance is applicable to every single person on this planet. When somebody comes at us and is like, what the heck are you doing? You were missing the boat on this. Like, just do it. Like, whatever. Then you have a reaction to that. And especially if I'm a teen, like when I was a teenager, I would be like, yeah, and since you came in here and said some not nice things, I'm going to not do it longer, right? Like I'm going to resist you even harder because I feel like you were rude or whatever. Like I didn't like how that went. But I think I was imagining myself in those situations where I was having trouble getting started. And if my parent would have come in and been like, hey, how is it going? Like, it looks like you're painting your nails, right? I love that. That's amazing. I'm sure they'll look great, but you also seem to be avoiding your homework. Talk to me about that. Like, what's going on? Right. And I would have been like, man, I don't even know where to start, or it's really overwhelming. I have this huge test and I'm not sure how to study, or whatever the dynamic would have been. I can see myself kind of softening to that.
When there's a safe container. Yeah.
Yes. Right. Versus being like, did you do your stuff? Or right. It's very, almost scripted. Like, it's just like, I could predict what you're going to say. And then I'm going to say like, yeah, I got it done. Right. Because I want it to be done, or I'm not going to reveal that I'm struggling, because if I feel like it's not going to be met with a helpful solution or like compassion, then I don't want to seem weak. Right. So I'm going to be like, yep, I got it, or whatever. And I think teaching our kids that they can ask for help is so great, and that like other people might have good solutions. And I know sometimes my own kids I'll say like, okay, like we need to pick up your room, right? Or whatever it is. And my kids might say like, where should I start? And I'll be like, one idea that's worked well for you is the rainbow order. Would you like to do that? And they might say, no, not today. And I'm like, do you want to do biggest to smallest? Right? Or what idea do you have? And my kids sometimes come up with better ideas than I do often.
When we listen and bite our tongue and really are curious, they usually do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and part of our goal, like I remind myself as a parent, and like in my therapy clinic to parents that I'm working with, like, you're not always going to be here. Like none of us will be getting out of this life alive. Right. Like, so our kids have to be able to do life without us. And so part of our job is to teach them how to do these things. And so like this type of scaffolding that you're suggesting, which I love, is about being curious and compassionate, because our kids are going to have way more complicated things happening in their life than homework. There's going to be bigger things that happen. Right. And like right now, this seems like such a big deal, but there are other things like, drug usage, or having a friend who they feel like is not making good choices. They're worried about them, suicidal ideation, like just all these other things that happen in life. And we want them to know that we're a soft place to come to, that like we're going to meet them with kindness and curiosity, and we're going to be there to support them. I mean, you might be upset, right, because of something that has happened, but that's on us, right? Like as the parent to metabolize or work through that emotion. And we can be frustrated with our kids. It's not like you can't have, Yeah, but that's our response to them. And so remembering that, like, when we get upset with our kids, that's us, right? And so we need to figure out how to stay calm, because if you get angry, that turns that channel off. Like, you're going to find out no more information about that, and they're going to start closing down and closing down and closing down. And then you're going to say to yourself, why does my teenager never talk to me? Why don't they tell me anything? And often when I talk to teens and they say, like, I don't tell my parents anything, and I'm like, tell me about that. Like, I'm curious about what happened. And often it's because they lecture, they parent explain, which I love that terminology. They think they know more, or they're critical or judgmental, right? And that shuts our kids down. So I think in this place, like, our kids know what's getting in the way, right? They might want to avoid it. And so when we're back to the executive functioning thing, like, and we're looking at homework or whatever the task is that they need to do, they probably know what's in the way, right? But if we meet it with softness to say, like, hey, help me to understand, like, what's going on, right? Like, or I'm curious about this, then they're probably going to tell us. And then I love giving them the option to solve the problem for themselves first. Like, what ideas do you have, or what's the next step that you're going to take? And they might not know, right? And we can come in to say, like, what do you think about this idea? And they might hate every single idea you come up with. And then you might, I would default back to, okay, like, what ideas do you have, right? Even though they said they had 0, you gave some, they didn't like them. You go back to, like, what ideas do you have? Because they might have come up with something in that time, which is why they're saying no, no, no. Or what can we do next? Or how can I support you? And sometimes it's just a matter of, like, I sometimes don't know what the solution is, and I just hug my kids, because all of them will still let me, right? And I hope they do forever.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because one thing that I say a lot to parents is that the conversation isn't about the resolution of the topic, really. The conversation is about leaving the conversation feeling heard. That's the objective. So the homework may not even get done at all, but it may not have gotten done anyway.
Yes.
With arguing about it. But the objective of the conversation is that your kid feels heard and seen and understood, and like you got their back.
Yeah, which is hard, because that's not what we're taught as parents, right? Like, we're taught, like, we are supposed to be this, like, authority figure that makes our kids do the things that they need to do. Yeah. Wow, Seth, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like I just want to keep talking to you about this and learning more about your thoughts and how you handle this. But I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Tell me before we leave, who are a couple of your favorite theorists or models?
So I am big on systems.
I'm a model junkie.
Yeah, I love systems theory. So, like, I am a trained social worker, and so systems theory, in my very basic terms, is mostly like, we all are involved in systems, and all of us impact each other, right? And so, if
systems theory, that old book from the 70s or something like that?
Yeah, it's a really very old. Okay, yes. Yeah. And so as social workers, that's like one of our, like, that's kind of where we were founded out of. And so I believe that we impact each other. And if you change one part of the system, that doesn't necessarily change all of the system. And so, like, we have to look at each part of things that are involved in people's lives to figure out, like, what gets in the way. Right. So exactly what you're talking about. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Where it's like, we're all involved in these things. So I like that. In terms of models, I'm a trained play therapist. So I think, I love the idea of, like, play is kids' language. And so they can teach us things through that.
I'm taking notes now, everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
I love learning.
And then
who is your favorite play therapy personality?
Gosh, that's really hard.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think there are several people that I think really do well in that. And then I think, there's so many models that I love. I am always, like, learning and growing. But I also, a type of therapy that I do is EMDR, and Francine Shapiro is the creator of that. And I think a lot of the things that she has taught us about how the brain works and how we can process through trauma, and trauma being self-defined, I think is really important, because that has helped me as a clinician to do better work. And I mean, there's so many people that I just, like, really think do great work. But I also like narrative therapy. You're talking about the conversation, like the message that we have in our brain. I mean, yes. So I'm a junkie too of learning more. Like I think if I could have a superpower, and I'll ask you what your superpower would be, but literally if I could touch a book and know all the information in it, I would be thrilled. Like that would be amazing to me. What would you pick?
Well, now you have AI, ChatGPT. So.
Yes, so I can. Yes.
What would I pick as my superpower?
Mm-hmm.
If I could have a superpower?
Yes, any superpower.
I mean, I'm sappy about world peace and stuff like that. I would take all the grumpy, angsty people who think that people are supposed to be punished and who aren't about equality and treating people with, as human beings with dignity and stuff. I would probably have a magic wand that would make them, just love everybody. And
I was going to say transform, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. See the benefit of this. Yeah. I agree with you. That would be great.
Yeah, I really believe that we are better together. And when there are problems, it's when, not that there shouldn't be conflict, but that we know how to work through conflict. But when we have problems and we look at conflict in terms of us versus them and things like that, and they're taking my stuff and there's not enough and all this sort of stuff. It's that sort of scarcity mindset stuff. I would have some power that really took that away and let us see that we are better when we're loving on each other and helping each other and caring for each other and looking out for each other. There is enough for everybody.
Yes.
We don't distribute it properly. But there is enough of everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm. So true. Yeah. And the scarcity mindset is just a lie. Like, I'm not saying that people are not in the mindset, a position where they don't have enough, but the mindset of that there's not enough. We all got to hold it in, can't share. Yeah. Yeah. That there's this competition, but I agree. Thank you again, Seth. This has been such a lovely conversation.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for what you do. Thank you, parents and teachers and students, anybody who's listening to this, just for taking the time to invest in yourself or in helping somebody else by being here and putting your attention here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What you do matters. It really does. Thank you for making a choice to, dive into something, hopefully that's helpful in some way.
Yeah. Thanks again, Seth. That was such an amazing interview. I hope that you're taking away a lot of pieces of how to know if your kid is struggling with executive functioning, but then also how to address it. And if you want more information, check out Seth's website at sethperler.com. With that, I'll say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe, rate our show, and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And also keep the emails coming with future topic suggestions to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.